Well, thanks for joining us, June. Really appreciate it.
Great to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, you're a great guest because you are the founder and CEO of Moms in Tech here in the UK. And you've done a lot in the venture capital space. You're really well entrenched. And so I thought it would be great to get your perspective on being a woman and also being a mom in technology. So there are a few misconceptions and things that I was thinking about out there, which is, that the opportunities are endless or boundless for moms to actually work and operate in the tech space. But from your experience, that might not necessarily be the case. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I mean, right from the education standpoint, obviously the stats tell us that, very few girls carry on with a career in technology. So there are actually only 17% of women in tech. So that's like already like a massive barrier. There are not that many that are sort of exposed to this world of technology. And in theory, it's so perplexing because technology is one of those careers where it can be done remotely, it can be done flexibly. It just makes perfect sense that there should be more women embarking on a journey in tech. And it does frustrate me that more hasn't been done. Obviously, there's some amazing initiatives, but there's still a few bottlenecks. And I think it goes back down to approaches in different workplaces as to what is okay in terms of work from home. There's that feeling that you should be in the office. We still get that, despite the reality is we're all working in lockdown at home, and we know that these jobs can be done remotely. But why is there still that blocker in that mindset at an organizational level as to just being more open and really stating it that these jobs can be done from home? And I think that's where we'll have more women applying. Just from my personal experience running Mums in Tech, there are some incredibly smart women out there who didn't study IT, at school, but I feel like anyone can learn anything at any point, and that's what Mums in Tech really showed. These are people who, perhaps were teachers, or we had someone who was, part of the London ambulance service, and she came on the course after 8 weeks, had learned everything from UX, product, agile, built a website, and was super interested on, in learning about, all things tech. So it can be done. It's not too late. Sorry to rant.
No, that's
But
fine.
I think more should be done.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly fine. I recall that you mentioned in our personal conversations before that you took 14 months off maternity leave, right? When you first
Yeah.
first did it, and that conversation initially, was it an easy one to have? Was it like, oh, of course, yeah, that's fine, leave for X amount of time, or 3 months, 4 months, 9 months, whatever it is? How were those initial conversations when you even wanted to decide to go on maternity leave while you worked in a tech environment or a financial environment, should we say?
Yeah, I mean, my very first maternity leave at Silicon Valley Bank, I was conscious that, it was a very exciting time to be at that bank because, we just got our banking license. I'd been part of that journey, sort of helping to do all the testing and watching the team grow from about 20 to maybe about 70 at the time where I was about to leave. And I thought, oh my God, I am going to miss out on the most exciting time. Operations were still being built out, and it was hard to know that, a year or even more was going to pass, and I was going to not be a part of those discussions and see that evolution of the bank. So, yeah, I was conscious that my career might suffer as a result of it, but then you are torn because there is this new human which you've grown, and you have to look after. In this case, it was my little boy. And I gave everything to him, obviously, in that first year, and I think that was really obviously what sparked my second maternity leave to be different. Because when I did come back, obviously, it was a case that that particular role couldn't be done flexibly, which, if I'm being very honest, was a bit of a shame because I would have loved to carry on in that role, but it was full time, and I wanted to come back part time. So I moved into a different team, and I think, everything happens for a reason. If I hadn't moved teams, perhaps I wouldn't have developed even more of a passion for startups, because I got to work with earlier stage tech companies, which really sparked this curiosity and desire to work even more closely and have a better understanding of how tech companies are built. But yeah, it was very much at the back of my mind that, how do we make sure that women who take a break from work don't come back disadvantaged? How do you keep them in the loop? How do you keep them learning? And how can maternity leave be an opportunity for growth? And I think that's really what I think companies should make sure is in place for employees, so that when they come back, they have a better chance of career progression. Because in some cases, it can be a case where you come back and you're having to take a step back, go into roles perhaps where they deem can be done flexibly, but might be a step back in your career.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate price to pay that society has sort of put on women in terms of the career progression, right? You leave for a bit and then you come back and you're not sure if the role is there. And, there's all sorts of penalties that it seems that moms have to face before they can rejoin the workforce. But let's talk a little bit about when you actually came back. So the expectations that were placed on you, or the level of productivity, do you think that the expectation would have been you would get right back into it and you'd produce at the same level as you were before? Or was it an expectation that, oh, she would need to leave from time to time, or, she'd have to, I don't know, pump, breast milk out to feed her kids,
Yeah.
all those kinds of things. Was the expectation different? And do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
In my case, I certainly felt that the expectation was that I would slot back in, back to how I was, and maybe that was just my perception of things, that I almost put pressure on myself that I was one of the first sort of 20 employees, obviously accumulated all this knowledge, and that I would come back and be able to train up new people, and that certainly was not the case, because I'd had 14 months off, definitely experienced baby brain, and didn't feel anywhere near as confident as I was prior to leaving. So I definitely felt that there needed to be sort of an easing back into the job time frame that was, in a way, make people aware that it will take time. You can't just come back and sort of go full steam ahead without having any sort of keeping in touch days. And those were available, but I hadn't taken them up. But it meant that I'd missed out on so many conversations and really felt very much out of the loop. So I think, in some organizations, they're definitely better prepared, and they do take that into account, and as you were saying, perhaps they do sort of lower their expectations of you, and I don't know if that's a good thing, because obviously we want to all believe that we're very capable. Why are you expecting less of me? I did all this amazing stuff before. Why don't you think I can do it now? So it's finding that balance, because yes, it's very easy to be left out of certain meetings that maybe will happen after you have to leave work, or happen early, but you can't get to those because you're doing the drop off, or maybe you're doing the pickup, or you just have to get home just so you can spend some quality time with your family. So yeah, I think there is definitely some sacrifices that will happen as the result of family life, but I think it's important that women feel that they can be vocal, and men, both parents. I think it's important to make this a talking point with your team, and I think this is something I wish I had done earlier. Been vocal and said, well, I really would like to be a part of this conversation. Would you mind if we did this sort of within the hours that I'm in the office, between, at that point it was 8 and 4, so my husband did the drop off and I did the pickup. So it's finding that confidence to actually say, please don't exclude me. I'm very capable. I would like to contribute. However, these are the parameters that I'm working within.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Playing devil's advocate just a little bit here. If imagine you're an employer and there's a woman that takes time off, or has to have this flexible need around here, right? If I use that as a justification to pay men more, for instance, because they stay for that year, they don't take as much maternity leave, they don't need that flexibility. I don't know if that translates into them being more productive or not, but what do you say to someone that would play that sort of card and say, there's a reason why I'm paying men more, because we have to make these allowances for women? How do you rationalize that, or how do you combat that?
I would tell them to go and look at a woman's diary and see how much she gets done in that little time she's in the office, because I think this is something that it's obviously very difficult to easily keep track. But maybe it's not actually productivity. There's loads of productivity tools, But the reality is, I know I work twice as hard, my 3 days a week. Even now, I work 3 days a week in venture capital than working ridiculous hours in a bank. I think, it's very easy for people to be sitting in the office till 11 o'clock, probably just having a chat. Maybe they've just had way too many water cooler discussions. And I think you, as a woman who has no choice but to work 8 to 4, you're focused. And I will say this from personal experience. I sometimes would not take a lunch break. I would leave myself out of certain chit chatty discussions because I had to get that work done. I didn't want it to appear as if I was, skiving at 4 o'clock. The reality is I got my work done when it was meant to be done. And I think I would challenge that person that says that the man should get paid more, because I would say, look at my output. And I think it really has to be, rethinking that conversation. It's not about bums on seats. I think it's really about output. How much are people delivering? If I'm getting my job done and more, then I want to be compensated exactly the same as that other person who has the luxury, and it is a luxury, of being in the office for longer. But if I don't have that choice, I shouldn't be penalized for that.
Yeah, I actually have one of my direct reports. She went on maternity leave, and you know, it's interesting, but actually, to your point about productivity, moms are some of the most productive people you will ever meet because their time is so valuable.
Yes,
What they'll get done in 5 minutes, it'll take someone else an hour to do. And so,
it's focus.
yeah,
You have to be focused.
yeah, exactly, 100% right. And that probably takes a mind shift change from the number of hours that people work on something to actually what is the output. So an output based compensation or view of rewarding people as opposed to a 60 hour, oh, I work 70 hours. You know how people feel really chuffed with themselves about that, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it is down to output. And I think, even the way I work today, you, you know the world of venture capital. At the end of the day, it is a job that is so fluid. You're spending time reading decks, you're on Twitter. It's about information gathering, it's about networking. That won't necessarily fit into a 3-day week. But I think when you love your job, you will do it regardless. So you don't know what that woman is doing outside of those, her allocated hours. She's probably still reading. She's probably still keeping on top with her work because she does not want to disappoint. And I think there's that commitment when you have that flexibility. And it shouldn't be a luxury. Everyone should have the ability to work flexibly. It's not just about childcare. I think it's about pursuing other passions, caring for elderly relatives. There's so many reasons why somebody may need that flexibility, but it's sort of appreciating that they bring something different to the table and they should be valued just as much as the people who are able to work full time.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. You mentioned something there in terms of the venture capital industry. So just transitioning a little bit, in the venture capital industry, it's still predominantly male oriented, although there have been some improvements. So the percentage of female decision makers in venture capital did increase from about 9% in 2017 to about 13%. I believe that's a US statistic, but it is moving very incrementally in the right direction. But still, the majority of them have zero females in decision-making positions. How do you think we can overcome that? You alluded to the pipeline, but then also, being a mom or being a woman, making sure that you have the flexibility and then we measure productivity and things like that. But why do you think the progress has been so slow? And what else do you think we can do in the venture capital industry specifically to address that?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is a pipeline. I think making more women aware that they have a role to play in the venture capital industry, like any industry. I think it's very important that there is more awareness that diversity of thought is a good thing. It's not just about saying, the men and women. I think the reality is we will bring a different perspective. And I think it's changing. There's obviously some great organizations like All Raise and Fem Street, which is a newsletter and a community that are making it more accessible. I think it's also down to role models. I think how many females are we seeing at decision making level? Not that many, but the few that are out there are campaigning their butts off. They are making sure that they are bringing along other women behind them. I have a very active WhatsApp group that I'm a part of, and I can constantly see, them advertising different roles, making sure that the women in that group are spreading the word to other women that they know. There's there's a lot of training that's being made available. There's great groups like Going VC with lots of resources, and I think there's that element of advocacy. We just have to keep shouting about it, making other women know from different industries that you can get into venture capital. Those of us that have had a very untraditional path, sort of flying the flag and saying you can come in from different routes. You don't have to have the, Cambridge, Harvard, Oxford to investment bank to VC route. There are other ways. Mine is not that route. So I think I'm very conscious that I have to let people know that I got in, and I work flexibly, and I often talk about it because it's important that they know that you can make it work, especially as a mom, having to juggle. You don't have to worry that there is no space in this world for you, that it won't work for you, because I think it's actually one of the flexible careers out there. You're not stuck to your desk. You can do it from wherever, and I think you can make the role your own to an extent.
Being an advocate is something that requires bravery. It's something that requires you to see a role model and aspire to be like someone and really push the boundaries. What were you most nervous about before you decided to be more of an advocate and talk about, the fact that there's a lack of women in there? Or just walk me through a bit of your thought process, because I can imagine that's a bit daunting to be, first of all, not just one of the few women, but secondly, one of the few women of color in an industry which is male dominated. I mean, what was going through your mind? Were you nervous? Were you scared? Were you thinking about your perception? All those kinds of things.
Yeah, and that's a really good question. And my mom, as much as she admires what I do, she often says, June, how do you do all this? And I say, because I do feel it's my responsibility. I do feel that um, you you can't just wait around waiting for change. I think I've always been that sort of person who will stick her hand out and try and help someone. It's just always been part of my nature. I think I got the award for goody goody two shoes at school, so there is something in there. It says a lot, but I think I've always wanted to help people. I've always been conscious that I want to be, someone who helps to change the world. As corny as it sounds, that's always been how I thought about it. So yeah, I didn't really think too hard about the personal implications on myself. All I kept thinking was, how can I help change things? How can I make it better? Because the reality is, we we can't do it alone. It's not just down to me. So what I do is bring people along on the journey, find other advocates, people of influence who can help actually make this change. And I think I'm that person who likes to bring people together to unite and to try and change the world together. And it's baby steps. We're getting there slowly. I'm doing little things like organizing events for female founders. I've been mentoring people on the side. Whenever I see an application, I'm making sure I'm spreading the word to other women, other people of color, and just seeing, doing whatever we can to help change the stats. Because the reality, it's not going to change overnight. There's a lot of mindset shifting, but I'm privileged in that I can be in a lot of these rooms and have these conversations. So I make sure that since the door was open for me, I keep that door open for other people, and I make sure I use that chance to use my voice in a good way, and it's what I love. It feels natural, and I think if it was anything other than that, then it would feel like hard work, and it doesn't. So I carry on the work.
Oh, that's great. No, that's really amazing. And I know that you're viewed as a leader, a female leader, a strong female leader, not just in the VC community, but in the financial community, in many regards and respects. Do you think there are any differences in the way women lead and the way men lead within organizations, or do you think that leadership is agnostic to gender?
That's a good one and a hard one, because I mean, I think there's often that feeling that yes, women are more empathetic, and we lead with our hearts. But I will say that I've met some really stern women, and I've met some very very kind-hearted men, and I think what makes us different Yeah, we do. There is ultimately a bit of a gender lens. We can't deny that. But I think good leadership is good leadership. And I think good people are good people. And you will find people who are measured and um, hopefully see the world through a lens where, you know, they're willing to take into account different perspectives. I think that's what makes good leadership, in my opinion. I try to see, when I'm speaking to someone, I try to think of it from their point of view, and try and remove bias, you know, from my thinking as much as possible. And I think if we had, hopefully, more people who, you know, just approach it just from a very human lens, and not sort of this airs of power.
Yeah, you touched on something that was very interesting there, which is the bias, the unconscious bias, and all those types of things. I'm personally facing a dilemma as well, where I'm trying to advocate for things, and you can speak up, but sometimes that doesn't translate into action, right? Where the rubber meets the road by actually getting more women in tech companies, or not, having them penalized for taking time off, and all those kinds of things, right? But the question here is, how exactly do you get all these talking points, this unconscious bias, all those types of things to translate into action without mandating it in terms of, oh, we need to have 50% of women in here? Because I know that
Yeah.
can hurt sometimes. Sometimes it can help, like affirmative action in the US. But do you think that there are intangible ways that'll translate into actual action, or do you have to make it tangible in terms of KPIs, metrics, and things like that, and that's the way to really make the change?
I mean, it's a bit of both. I think you do have to have some element of mandate in that, you know, perhaps it could be things like making sure you have an equal a pool of applicants that you're looking at. So it's not just the one token black candidate in there, you know, but then it goes a step further. Is how are you sourcing your candidates? Are you even reaching the right communities? You know, you know, people will say, oh, but no, there's no black people applying to these jobs. Did you go one step further and try and reach them where they are? And I think that's so important that, you know, we measure how much of that are we doing, how proactive. There has to be a proactive element to it. And but obviously the last thing we want is for a candidate who's not suitable for the job to be hired, as we often find in our lovely country Nigeria. But it's, yeah, it's make you want to ultimately have the best people for the job, so that someone doesn't come tomorrow and say, well, you hired a terrible person, well, we don't want to do this anymore, and then it becomes the end of that conversation. Get the best candidates, but you're going to work a bit harder to do that, just to make sure that they actually get to see your job application, take the time to understand them, take the time to check yourself and your bias, make sure you've done the work on you, so that when they come in, you're willing to really listen and hear them, and see the value that they can actually add. Because I think that's really important, that they're not coming and wasting their time because you're not ever going to let them in through the door.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. Getting that pipeline and that process from start to end, because it's not just where you're recruiting, but it's the recruitment process itself. Once they're in the company, how they develop, all that kind of stuff. It's a long process.
Retention.
Retention, exactly.
Yes.
There's so many elements to it.
Yeah.
In fact, there's an interesting statistic about how if you have that one token black or one token female candidate, the chances of them getting hired are almost 0%. But as soon as you have two, it jumps up by like 300 or 400%, the chances of one of them getting hired.
Yes.
So in other words, having just the one token person, female or whatever ethnic diversity, that doesn't really help. So that I
Yeah.
thought that was pretty interesting. But so let's talk a little bit about. We've talked about the recruiting and the sourcing, but once you're actually in the company, the development programs or even the selection criteria for partner positions and all those kinds of things, do you think that they are favorable towards maybe men or maybe Caucasians or anything like that? And how can we try and improve the ratio once someone is in the company, the retention piece that you spoke about?
Yeah, that's super important, and I think, you know, it's very important that the company takes the time to really mentor. You know, okay, in my world, it's definitely an apprenticeship. You know, you're not going to learn the job overnight, so it means you're spending time with the partners, talking to them, and really being in that circle. But you need to feel welcome. So it's really up to the partners to take the time to try and understand you, and you also do your bit to help them, you know. And for me, I'm very open. I talk about my culture a lot, and you know, they've met my family, I genuinely feel at home. But also, what is great is that there are other communities of Black investors, and you know about 10 by 10 VC. We have a WhatsApp group that's really active, and it's great for me to see sort of the journeys of the other investors, what's helped them, just sort of us troubleshooting together. I think that helps retention as well, because we can help each other and say, okay, well, have you thought about doing this? And there's this training plan, and just understanding what could be the next step in our careers, and how do we make sure that we are the best we can be? How do we keep evolving? So yeah, there's that personal responsibility, but also the responsibility of the firm to make sure that you do see your progression path. And you know, I do believe in having a mentor, having a sponsor internally who ensures that you are constantly moving forward, but keep having an open conversation about where you want to get to, what you want to learn. And that's all very important. Obviously, continue to build your personal brand, and continue adding value.
Yeah, you're actually an expert, at least in my opinion, on building a personal brand because I've seen you in so many different places and forums, and you seem to have been able to do that. How do you think women can build a good personal brand? Are there any tactics or tools or concepts or principles in building that brand so that you raise awareness, as you're mentioning, that you are here, you are available, you have certain needs, you have certain capabilities? How do you build a brand as a female leader?
Yeah, I mean, just from my personal experience, just going way back to even when I started Mums in Tech, I didn't even have a Twitter account prior to March 2015. So I set it up then, and I started small. You know, you start following a couple people that you respect. You start sharing some thoughts. I love reading, so I read a lot of blogs and listen to podcasts. And what I do is I tend to share it, and maybe connect with the person who wrote the blog, have a conversation. I've learned to abandon being shy, and I think that's been the best thing I ever did was realize that everyone's human, everybody likes to chat. But obviously, you go to them with a reason as to why they should talk to you. I've read your blog post. I really love this thing you said. I'd really love to carry on the conversation. Very rarely will they say no. Even some of the busiest people will make the time for like a 5 10 minute chat. But don't be afraid to ask. I also love writing, so very often I will you know do a guest post for someone, or write on Medium. And I also started writing on LinkedIn, when I started Mums in Tech, just documenting the journey on, every week, whatever we learned, I would write about it. You slowly build a brand there, people engage, and I think it's important that you sort of um, give as much as you take. So, when that person that you had a conversation with writes something great, share it. Sort of, it's a cycle. And I think it's also down to action. Being willing to give up your time. So I mentor people, and I make myself available so that when they have questions, they know they can come back to me. I think you can build a brand for yourself that way as well. Just being the super connector, the one that makes introductions. You could be the one who has always 5-10 minutes to go through the pitch deck. There are so many things you can do, but I think hone in on what you enjoy, and then it just feels really natural for you.
Yeah, I don't know how you have the time to do this because you've got, a couple kids and you're working in a very, stressful environment. At least venture capital from the outside seems very, intense, and you have deadlines and numerical figures you need to hit. There are all these different things. How do you stay, I don't want to say zen, but how do you stay calm amidst
Balance.
balanced? Exactly. How do you stay balanced amongst all these different things?
Yeah, I do a lot. I know people often ask me, how do you do it all? Um, and just to caveat, I do work 3 days at Samos, so I'm usually working Tuesday to Thursday, and then outside of that, the kids are all in the entertainment world. So pre-COVID, at least, we were jetting off to auditions, and I also do a bit of modeling and acting on the side, which I love. So I do love this portfolio career. And I think in a way, they balance each other out very nicely. So there's some days where I'm doing a lot of networking. There's some days where I'm doing a lot of reading. And then I'm, out and about quite a lot, which is something that I find gives me energy. I wouldn't say I'm your sit down at home type of girl, but I love listening to podcasts. I find that relaxing. So I'm learning and then I sort of slowing down a little bit. I watch a lot of Netflix. That helps me keep zen. I'm a closet TV addict, so
Okay.
that's something that I do watch a lot of TV. Believe it or not, there's time. Um, and I do things like yoga, and I really believe in mindfulness. So got Calm app on my phone. I also love Happy Not Perfect. But yeah, speaking to family, speaking to friends, I think it's important to make time for real life. As much as we all love our jobs and we could, in theory, spend all our time on Twitter and Instagram and speaking to brilliant founders, it's important to unwind, every once in a while.
Fantastic. Well, that's pretty much what we wanted to go through today. If people want to, reach out to you, or is there any particular message you'd like to get out there to our audience?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to encourage people who are interested in getting into venture capital to reach out to me. I'm happy to share resources with you. There are a ton. We definitely need more women. We need more, people of color in venture capital. So I would encourage you to find someone that you feel like you can connect with, start following their journey, speak to them. The reality is, yes, a lot of the jobs are not advertised. It can be in closed loops. So I think it's important that you ask, are you hiring? And if you're not, please don't be shy to ask for an internship, because the chances are, you do that and you can make your way in very convoluted ways, or start a podcast, start building your brand, because it's always going to be super helpful when you do try and knock on the door to say, these are all the things that I've been doing. VC is a natural fit for me. And for founders who are looking for funding, please reach out. Always happy to mentor, always happy to look at a deck. So don't be shy.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, June.